Schaefer.
Present.
Trustee Morton.
Here.
Trustee
Here.
Student trustee Damiani.
Here.
Everyone present.
Okay, so we will have to return to closed session after the meeting. If anyone wants to wait around and get the disclosure of closed session when we're done, we would gladly email or text, whatever. But we're not complete with that. We have not completed closed session. And we have a public hearing for closed session. Is that still in play? We're waiting for later on that one.
Was anyone present?
Yeah, was anyone there?
No.
Okay, no. And we are up to the approval of the agenda. Anyone have anything to remove or add? Move around, pull?
I move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
And we have, we're a little late for our timed public hearing. 5.1. Do you want to go ahead with that?
Sure. So this is the public hearing for the EPA, the Education Protection Account. We get a certain amount of money based on how many students we have in the district. And we use those funds for salaries, about $95,000.
Okay, and do we have any comments from the public? No. So this is not any kind of action. And then 5.2?
So this is the final step in the maintenance assessment district where we charge a fee for helping to maintain the facilities for public use. So this is the final one, final resolution, public hearing for that process.
Okay, any public comment? Board comment? Okay. On to the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're up to reports. You?
All right, so this is my final report for this year. So just, I've got kind of two parts to the report. So first of all, I'm just going to do my normal, everything that happens kind of at our school. So in the school community, there was a yearbook launch party for the 100th year edition of the yearbook. That was a big success. There was food and everything and music being played, and it was a good time. We had a final study hall that was appreciated. ASB specifically is starting to reuse things. We finally got a storage closet, which we're really happy about that. Graduation, I thought personally went very smoothly, and I think a lot of other people thought so too. And the speeches were good. Tobin's was a fun time, although there might have been a little too many babies there. So yeah, another thing was we had Sober Grad, which is after graduation, a bunch of students, we all went to Crown Hall and just had a fun time and celebrated graduation. There was actually quite a bit of people there, and I think everyone who went had a really good time. I know I did, and it was a good time. So I know definitely our class is going to look into doing that again next year. Next, so I won the re-election for board representative for the school. No one against me, but hey. And for that next year, I'm planning on actually creating like resources for future board representatives from the school, because I know when I like first started, it was a little bit confusing because I would ask previous representatives from the school and they would just kind of say, oh, just say what happens, but there's a lot that happens. So I have a template right now for my reports, but I'm planning on making it more like official and maybe making some resources for the next future representatives or to be more smooth. Next, sports. I know we already know this because we're going over it, but hiring a new soccer coach. And then also with academics, which the second half of my report is about this, but we finished our pilot year at the high school for standards-based grading. And then as well, we have 3 staff members leaving, so Mr. Crockett, Mr. Grimberg, and Ms. Morse, and I just want to say thanks to them. So yeah. All right, so starting with the grading, the pilot year of the standards-based grading. So basically what we did was at the end of the year, we had a survey that was somewhat generic that teachers could then tailor more to their class, but there were specific questions that were asked in every class. And so I have the data for that, and I'm going to talk about that. So first of all, the first takeaway we got from this data was about the students' perception of the importance of formative work, which is essentially just practice work. So there's the 2 kinds. There's formative work, which is practicing the things you're learning in class, and then summative, which is tests and projects and other things to show that you've actually learned things. So our findings with that is that certain classes require more like daily practice, and so students in these classes said that they valued formative work more, and that they said that they did it more because they wanted to actually learn the material, and they needed it. So students in those positions valued it more, but in classes where formative work was seen as less important by students, it was these students also responded that they did it more for this formative like practice work more for a grade rather than to actually learn the material. So we have some charts up here. So this is from an English class. So as you can see, it's kind of shifting more towards the less important for learning. And so that also shows that these students are more likely to do it for a grade rather than to learn or practice. Just more things. So for these 2 classes specifically, these are some classes that maybe need more daily practice and build upon all the practice that they've done. And so in these classes, you see that the students said that they felt that the formative assignments were more important for learning. And so also you see that the reasons that they're doing it is less likely for a grade in these classes. And these 2 are pretty similar. It's this top one is to learn. So students are doing these assignments to learn, and this one is to practice for the summative assessments. So those are pretty similar. It's like if you're studying for a summative assessment, you're learning the material because on the summative assessment you show what you've learned. So those 2 are pretty similar. So as you can see in these classes that it's going up over here, you're also getting an increase in the students actually wanting to learn. So another part of this standards-based grading is the ability to relearn and reassess assignments. So basically, this is just students get the opportunity to retake tests or edit essays and other things for full or partial credit, depending on the teacher or the class. So the goal with this is to encourage more of a growth mindset and also recognize that not all students learn at the same pace, and also that the goal is to allow students the opportunity to learn the material rather than cutting it off to them. So instead of saying, oh, this is a hard deadline, saying, oh, here's the opportunity to reassess and you can still learn this material rather than it just being, well, that's the past. So the findings were that students definitely appreciate the opportunity, but they rarely take advantage of the opportunity to reassess. And the most common response as to why that was because they didn't have enough time, which Tobin and I discussed it, and this could be that certain teachers maybe think about the fact that that students have a lot of classes and that maybe a little less work, but that's just a possibility. So again, more graphs. So yeah, you can see that they this is one of the ones that is more spread out. So there's a high thing of that they appreciate it, but then there's a lot more responses that they don't actually take advantage of it. And this is just one of the ones that says not enough time. That's a big reason. So yep, again, more of that. They really appreciate it, and then it's more spread out. So the third part of this was the goal of standard-based grading was to try and remove behavior from grades. So the idea behind this in standards-based grading is that grading should reflect academic progress and achievement, and rather than behavior. So when things other than academics play into grades, it can inflate grades, and grades can become more meaningless and subjective because the behavior is really up to the teacher. So the goal is to make the grades a lot less subjective and more about reflecting what a student has learned. So this is one of the points that had a lot of mixed responses. So it's not really one way or the other. So some students over here really agree, and it's also, once again, just displayed over here. But this could also be because of maybe the grade level that these students are at, like maybe younger kids feel that it should or shouldn't play in, and just other things. But that's the behavior.
You're saying those two charts represent different grades?
No, what I'm saying is that the reason that it could be skewed and maybe not one way or the other is depending on like age, because if you're in a younger grade class and there's more rowdy kids, some kids might feel that. I know that from what I've heard from these younger kids in these classes is that they're definitely more rowdy, and they wish that the students who are more eccentric.
What are the two different data sets there?
Okay, so these are different classes. So this one is English class. This is like a English 1-2 class. So this is freshman and sophomore, and then this is I believe Spanish 1 or 2. I think it's Spanish 2. So once again, some younger grades. But so we didn't have data on this from older grades, but that was just something I wanted to point out.
And it's representative, of all the different classes.
Yeah.
We didn't aggregate data so much because a lot of it was, since it's based on an individual class, there were slightly different approaches to how they did this.
And then the fourth one is standards-based grading. Standards-based grading's ability to support a student's learning. So this is basically just, this question was about how the students thought this supported them, if it helped them succeed or just like grades-wise, or if it just helped them learn more. So the goal of it is to create a grading system that actually supports learning rather than other things. That should be the main goal of it. So we found that students feel that the system has definitely helped them and has made them more successful in general. So we have a bunch of different graphs. So I believe it goes, goes Spanish, that's an English class, that is a math class, that's a multimedia class, a PE class, and this is, I don't quite remember which one that is, but basically, we're not negative. Oh yeah, biology. So we're not going in the negative direction. Some of them might be kind of inconclusive, and some students are, yeah, but there are definitely classes that they felt it helped them. So this is really good. This is like what we want to see. And basically, yeah, generally students felt that the new system helped them to, they felt more supported and felt that it helped them learn the material better. And so, yeah, this is this is just that it helped them be more successful. And again, it's positive or neutral. Some other survey data, the other stuff was more class specific, but the questions were, some of them were kind of similar, and the general response was that this new system did help them. And yeah.
Do you think it actually did improve their experience? They say they felt that way, but
Mhm.
then they say they don't take advantage of it. So in the end,
Mm-hmm.
was it a feel good, or do you think it was a real improvement to the learning experience of your fellow schoolmates?
So what they said that they weren't taking advantage of was specifically the reassessment, but they, in general, they were saying that the whole system, because the reassessment is just one part of it, but the whole system being like more geared towards learning the material rather than like more busy work. That's what they were saying that they felt was a positive thing, and I definitely do agree with what they've written there, and they've said that in the surveys. And generally, just talking with students, it definitely seems like they're like, oh wow, I've actually learned a lot this year, and that's a good thing. Just so yeah. And then I've got some personal things. Yeah, I think I personally really appreciated the system. Compared to last year's, it really pushed me to actually learn more. And I think that's the whole point of school, so I really liked that. And yeah. So our next steps would be, so this was just a pilot year, but the next steps would be that the teachers are going to continue working and developing this system and get it fine-tuned to be right for our school and find a good system that will actually work. But it will probably always be changing. And we would also like to get more feedback from students in coming years, and that would be a big part to play into how the grading system is changed. So yeah, that's all I got.
That's very insightful and thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah, thank you, Remy. And I could add that it's going to give us some real, it gives me some real results that I can point teachers in a direction. You know, for example, when you look at classes where the students say, oh, it's kind of busy work, or this work doesn't really help us with the summative assessment, I can tell those teachers, look, here's why maybe they're not doing the practice work, because they don't see the value in it. So you got to change those assignments, make it more valuable, and tie it in better to what you're actually asking the students to learn. So it really gives us some good direction there. I'm going to just focus on a couple things. You heard from Remy about the event, and the best thing I heard him say about that is that his class wants to do it next year, Safe and Sober Grad. This is the last 2 years it didn't happen. 2 years ago it was Sierra Nevada, and no one wanted to go to it. Last year it was, we had all intentions, and the parents didn't quite get it together, but we were all ready for this year, and we made it happen. So it was a group effort. We had a couple donors that I think the district will need to acknowledge because of the $500. But Harvest Market donated $500 credit for food, and Stanford Inn by the Seas, Catch a Canoe and Bicycles 2 donated the grand prize, which was a mountain bike. So a senior boy won the mountain bike. We had a number of Corners of the Mouth also donated food, and then a number of businesses donated gift certificates that were drawn every hour that students could win. We had a couple competitions that, some smaller ones that, gift certificates that students could win as well. So I wanted to thank the Good Life, Mendo Market, Corners of the Mouth, Moody's, the Surf Shack, and the Cafe Beaujolais Brickery, the pizzas. So. This next one I hesitate to put up because I am sure there are people not on this list. But these are the ones I know about from going to the committee meetings to set this up. And I am sure there are people who are not on this, but Shanti Bishop took the lead, and as you can see, a number of parents helped out. You need a lot of chaperones, people that went out and got the gift certificates and approached the businesses. And so next year, hopefully we can pick up on this and we'll have to do some fundraising and keep this event going. So we really rebranded it and shifted it from being a sort of all-night thing to more of a slumber party where they could actually go to sleep and not have to stay up all night. And I think that was super popular. I also, like, one thing I realized in talking with Shanti, you know, we can do this whole event and have them safe for one night and they could go out Saturday night and be unsafe. But one of the things that Shanti said was everyone was so exhausted. The seniors were so tired after graduation that if you then added that on top of driving out to some party and alcohol and all that, that it would really be a recipe for disaster. So I think that's a good point. Like, you know, there's parties, however many, whatever weekends, but the fact that this is one where you have a lot of exhausted kids that are in this heightened state, you know, that it's a good night to provide a safe place for them to do this. So it's an event that's not without questions and things, but I think the way that we are rebranding this and opening it really makes sense and is super positive. So I hope to keep it going in this form, you know, year after year. So I'm glad to hear that Remy felt the same way. Yeah. So thank you to everybody that participated in that. I just want to give you guys, we got the visiting committee report, I think, in April. So, you know, here we are a couple months later, but I just wanted to let you guys know briefly about how that went. So if you recall, in March, they came and visited the site for one day, and this is exactly what you want to hear. It says that we continue to address the relevant action plan items that we identified in 2016. And it says there are not concerns by this mid-cycle committee that the school has omitted from its annual action plan any critical areas from the 2016 visit, nor any newly identified concerns. So what that means is we are doing exactly what we said we would do, and that the concerns we identified are exactly the concerns that people have. And so we're working on them. There's nothing that we swept under the carpet or that some big, you know, elephant in the room that we weren't addressing. All the issues in our WASC are, you know, the ones we should be working on. So that's exactly what you want to hear from the visiting committee report. They mentioned our intervention systems, the social emotional learning with the social worker and trauma-informed practices, our grading discussion they noted. Looking at our interventions at college and career readiness. Number 5, I think, is super nice that they noticed. Visible and articulated sense of community among the students and staff and other stakeholders. That was a big part of what we were trying to establish the last few years. CTE, development of the CTE pathways. And our school plan is continuing the self-study. It's in line with what we said we would do. Technology issues have been addressed. They had some recommendations to continue to implement the communication, especially around college and career planning. So I think we are going to really be upping that in the next few years. And we started by even moving the senior red folder meeting to the junior year, so they're coming into their senior year with some information already. They want us to be more specific about our goals, and I'll show you. I think we're going to be more data-driven with those on our single plan. And then they said that we should explore vertical articulation. In fact, in admin today, we were talking about that. So, you know, these are all things that are happening, and that they said we should continue to focus on, not just with the K-8, but also with Mendocino College. And, you know, I think those connections are also being made. The documents are all available on the website. If you go to the website, you can find the visiting committee report, you can find our report, and you'll see the goals are all the same. They haven't changed since 2016, but the actions have been updated, and those have changed. The format's a little different. We now have these targets, which are data-driven. So for example, you know, we'll reduce the number of behavior intervention by a certain amount, and then there's some baseline data, there's sort of research-based best practices, and then based on those, there's actions and some additional sources of evidence we can look at. So the hope here is, instead of going in and saying, how are we going to show this, we know exactly what metric we're going to go to, and we can look at it and we can see how has this changed. And you know, I'm sure there'll be discussions about whether that metric shows it or not. But at least we know where we're going to go to look at the data and what we're going to track to see, rather than the whole cycle being, let's gather all the data we can and just look at it and try to plug it in in the proper places. We'll have that all sort of, you know, prepackaged. So again, all those documents are available on the website. And lastly, little good news here. I don't know when the last time was we were on this list or what it even means. Mark, I'm sure you would love to tear this apart, and I would, you know. So I will only show it when we make it on the list. I will never say when we don't make it on the list. But I got a notification that we were on the ranking, and it looks like, from what I can tell, we're in like the top 10%. There's some, I think 17,000 schools that are actually ranked in the nation out of, I don't know, 24,000 or something like that, and we're at about 1,600. Or I think in California, there are, same thing, we're about top 10%. So it's based on various things, some formula that if you really wanted to look at, you could look at, and it's not at all something that we strive for. It just happens, but it was still kind of neat to see that. So we're the #1 school in our area.
They changed their methodology this year.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that benefited us the most was the increased reliance on graduation rate
Right.
as a
Yeah.
criteria.
We were,
When you have 100%
we're
graduation
tied for first in that one,
you
Michael.
can't go.
You can't get it, yeah. I don't know how many schools we're tied with, but we're tied for first in that one.
You could graduate some juniors.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, so like there's all sorts of things that have kept us off the list in the past, like, you know, certain demographics accessing AP exams and things like that, where we would just never break through. So again, it's a total statistical thing, but it is nice to, you know, to at least be able to show up every once in a while on that. So there we go. All right, any questions?
Thank you.
And Remy, thank you for a great year of service. That presentation was, I think I could have you do the in-service for the teachers and explain, like, really, that would be a really valuable thing for them to hear you say that, those things. So it really made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the fact that you want to make it improve the experience for the next person
Yeah.
is good too. Thank you. All right, so looks like I'm up. So I've been trying to be active in the community. I spoke at the Rotary meeting at the beginning of June, just kind of gave a state of the district report and talked about our enrollment and some of the things that make us unique. and I'm scheduled to speak at the League of Women Voters in September. And just yesterday, I was the guest on the local radio station sports phone. That was a new experience for me. This is a weekly program that's put on by Jim Young and Jerry Young, and they do a great job. It was really fun. I listened to the whole show after I was on, about 20 minutes of it. But boy, it's right up my alley. They talk about all the stuff I want to talk about. So that was fun. I talked about the value of sports and public education. So.
You missed Paul McCarthy called up as soon as you got off and wanted to know if there was going to be funding for new tennis courts in the high school refurbishment.
He wins that lottery, we'll have.
Well, he mentioned that too, that you won't need it to go for a bond.
Well, we did. Actually, at the, I'll talk about this a little later, but at the Facilities Master Planning Committee, we did talk about the possibility of tennis courts. So I attended, all the graduations in the district. Well, I didn't attend the comp sheet promotion. I didn't attend that one. But very well done. Very good speakers. I love the energy there. And the high school said goodbye to 3 teachers this year, Meredith, Shane, and Tyler. And they had a gathering at the comm school, which I thought was very good. It was short and sweet. And then there was a gathering for the K-8 school, and they're saying goodbye to Adam Strupp and Shelley Estes and Sage Anderson. That's right. So we didn't do a district-wide gathering party this year. We didn't have any retirees. We're going to do something special in the fall, though, when we welcome our new staff in August on our donut day. It's going to look a little different. So putting plans together for that. And then the various school traditions were fun to watch and be a part of. There are, I know that at the high school we welcome the freshmen through a tunnel, and then we say goodbye to the seniors through a tunnel, and then the 8th graders are also going out of on their last day through a tunnel of kids and staff. And then right out here, all the staff members from the K-8 on the last day, they go out and they wave goodbye to the buses, and the buses are honking their horns all the way around, and the kids are hanging out the windows waving, and it's fun. It's fun to be a part of that. I think Jason will agree that might be the highlight of the year so far. Huh? It was fun. So and then I'd just like to thank the various staff members that I work closely with. Otto, he's done another great job. The facilities are maintained and they're looking great. The amount of work they do in setting up for these graduations is mind-boggling. They have to move all the chairs to the various the gyms in the area, and they had the graduation looking beautiful at the high school. Bus drivers seal the work that she does every year. Another year, no accidents. I have full confidence in our transportation program. We just have what I think is an immaculate record when it comes to driving kids to and from school and to field trips. District office staff, Jason, Susan, Michelle, and Tiffany. It's been a great year, and Sage at MCN. So things are running smoothly down there, and so to thank all the departmental managers. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are you here for
MTA?
MTA?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I speak from my seat?
You can, but you just need to speak into that microphone, which will not amplify your voice. It'll only make it usable for our video.
Almost everything I'm going to talk about has actually already been said, but wonderful presentation. It's been a busy few weeks, and we've successfully completed another teaching year. Everyone worked tirelessly to put on beautiful graduation ceremonies at the various high schools, and they followed it up with a safe and sober night after the regular high school graduation. There was a wonderful celebration and promotion ceremony at the K-8, And then there was an 8th grade dance at the Hill House. The 8th graders also participated in an educational field trip to Sacramento the week before school ended. I was on both campuses, the K-8 and the high school, on Monday and Tuesday of this week, and it almost seemed like business as usual. There were so many teachers still finishing up their grades and cleaning their classrooms. But now that all that is done, most of us are starting a much-needed summer break. Thank you.
No one from classified. We are 15 minutes out from our times item, so let's move on to, oh, we did. Thank you. Wind, any report?
I attended both the community school and high school graduations and enjoyed them both. Greatly enjoyed your speech, Tobin, and the guest speaker, being a high school graduate, that was very enjoyable. Having gone to school with him and recently making contact with him, getting him to share his experiences. It was interesting. I asked my daughter, "So who's the guest speaker?" I hadn't seen the paper. "Oh, I don't know, some guy. I don't know who he is." And I looked. Oh, Aaron, great. That was really enjoyable. That's all.
I went to the middle school promotion. I thought that was wonderful. And I went to the high school graduation. I also thought Tobin's speech was excellent. I do have to correct some of his teaching that he demonstrated during that speech. It's actually not that funny, but I'll say it anyway. This issue about where the sun rises and sets, I think that in this day and age, you're teaching them the incorrect answer. It isn't that it rises in the east and sets in the west, it's that it doesn't matter where it rises. It rises behind too much carbon and too much methane. And to that point, skipping ahead to the end of the meeting, I would really like to see the climate crisis on the agenda for next year and as a topic of conversation for the school year.
I dragged Jason to a webinar on potential bonds, facility bonds at the state level. And there's a bill in the legislature that on yesterday received its next level of passage that would potentially put a $13 billion bond on the 2020 ballot. That would be 10 billion of it would be designated for K-12 construction. There's still a lot of the parameters that haven't been determined in terms of how much will be for new construction, how much will be for modernization. And there's also a big push to put some kind of equity leverage in there, which would probably harm our district because they would base it on how much your district could potentially raise on its own. But all that being said, you know, this is a possible way of getting some funds for our high school modernization project. One of the fascinating facts that I got out of the presentation is that our high school is older than more than 90% of all the other school buildings in California. And you know, it's something that we should, I think, emphasize when we talk about why are you thinking about spending, you know, lots of money to renovate the high school. Well, when you have a building that's over 70 years old, it needs a lot of work. And you know, we're waiting for the architects that we hired to come up with a plan and what that's going to cost. But I have no doubt that the expense will be more than we put into this campus, for example. And we should be prepared for that and be prepared to be proud about what we're doing and ask for that kind of support from our community. So I thought it was a good thing, you know, those webinars, you learn some things and sometimes you wish they would get to the point quicker or not repeat themselves, but you know, it was an hour well spent.
time. Okay, so we're up to 9.1.
All right, so there were no changes in the LCAP since we last met 2 weeks ago. The only thing that I would like to point out is the Jason was able to finish the budget presentation for parents. I don't know if you have that handy, Susan. Do you have that handy? Or?
That's under 9.2.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's finally a pretty easy to read document of graphs for parents that just explains how much our budget, our revenue, where our revenue comes from, how much of our total budget we are planning on spending in the LCAP, and then the budgeted expenditures for high needs students for this past year, 18-19, and then how much we actually spent or were estimated to spend. So this was mandated by the state, and I think it's a nice document. I don't know how many parents will actually see it, but it is a part of our package, and we will have it online, and something we do submit to the county. So, but that's the only real update from 2 weeks ago.
So do you want a motion to approve the 2019-20 LCAP?
I do. It was presented the way we needed to in the way of the separation between the board meeting and the presentation. And so just some recognition that there's been a slight change as part of the motion. Would you like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the LCAP and highlight the fact that the budget overview has been added to it.
Okay, great.
A second.
Any discussion to that effect? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 9.2.
So 9.2 is the adoption of the budget, and Jason, do you have any comments to make or any changes to the budget since we last met?
So, I mean, the only thing, I haven't been changed in the budget. Nothing's changed that I presented, but as soon as it is adopted, we did add 1 FTE, and we are also planning on purchasing a couple of vans. So those are some immediate changes that will happen after adoption.
Okay, so we'll vote on as is.
Yeah, so as is, so nothing that what we're going to be submitting to the state is exactly what was presented.
Okay, very good. Can we have a motion, please?
I move that we adopt the 2019-2020 MUSD budget as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now for the MCN budget, any changes?
Staff continues to complain that we don't put a hot tub in the budget each year, but the budget is fine as is.
Will they settle for a bucket of warm water?
Not as much as they'll get, yeah.
Okay. A motion, please?
I'll move to approve the 2019-2020 MCN budget.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and you're going to present.
All right, so then next on the agenda is an update to the strategic plan. I came to the board in January to do my mid-year update. So I do it twice a year, so here we are in June. And as usual, the red means it hasn't been started or no progress is being made. The green means that we have made significant progress or it is complete. And yellow means that we have started to make progress on this item, and we're continuing to work on it. So the first goal has to do with parent and community engagement under 1.1.1. We had intended to look into Aries Loop. We never got around to it, so we will follow up in the fall with that. We'll meet with principals and the tech department to see if this is something we want to do. We are using a wide variety of we are getting the word out to our community, whether it's through listservs, newsletters, flyers. We are mailing more things home these days. I as a parent, received a lot of mail from the K-8 staff or from the K-8 school. I think mainly because in middle school, that's the best way to get things home. So I think we're doing a good job at getting the word out. And you know, sometimes I'll just something funny in Mendocino since we're here. We had a couple of great messages this year. One was out on the marquee. We had a parent vaping night. Instead of a parent informational night about vaping, it said parent vaping night. And then, which we fixed rather quickly. So
It could have been your best attended.
yeah, right. I mean, how that works is Jeannie and Tracy or Kim, they give the office aides the a layout of the sign and exactly where the letters go. And apparently the office aide that day forgot it in the office and didn't want to go back and put the wrong words up there in the wrong order. So it was pretty fun. There's more of that story, but maybe I'll tell you about that another day. And then the chorus boosters had a bingo night, a fundraiser bingo night, and on the subject line it said bong night. So, only in Mendocino. Yeah. So sometimes the communication gets a little mixed up, but we're trying. All right, so I don't know why I'm looking up there. So the standards-based grading at the K-12 is being discussed really in-depthly at staff meetings, and we're making some great progress there. So we can move on to the next one. All right.
Go too far.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Parent volunteers, third year in a row we had a parent volunteer class. Numbers remain high. A lot of parents have said that they really appreciate that class. They learn a lot about our school, and Linda's our volunteer coordinator, so thank you, Linda, for doing that. That's a very valuable thing that we are requiring our parents to do before they are volunteers in our school, at the K-8 school. Something that we are very proud of is 1.2.3, the Parent Resource Center. That is up and running, and we will get our our washing machine and dryer hooked up, and we'll have that ready by the start of the school year. Also in the green here, the cafeteria is serving healthier food, and we'll continue to do that and continue to improve there. 1.3.2, providing more internships. We had students work this year at the Little River Museum, the Noyo Science Center, the Art Center, the Land Trust, and Project Sanctuary. So Andy Wellspring is, yes?
We had that.
Oh, and at the at MCN, right. So we're giving our students opportunities to team with local businesses and nonprofits and get some valuable experience. So Andy Wellspring and Anna Levy worked hard on that this summer, or this year. So these are some of the stipends coming into play and really making a difference in our district that we decided we needed a few years ago. We're providing more opportunities for teachers to do more and make a bigger difference than they already obviously do. All right. If anybody has any questions, I'll stop. I'll just keep going here. So goal 2 has to do with systems of support. Let's see, what can I call out here? Our one-to-one Chromebooks at the high school, that is going very well. A lot of students are signing up for those, and we have had very few issues with breakages. Some screens have broken, but otherwise it was a great year. Rebecca Bailey, James, and Tobin did a great job there. We would like to provide more training for our teachers in for strategies for teaching EL students. We do once a year in-house training, but it came up at the LCAP a couple times from the K-8 staff and as well as at a parent meeting that maybe we want to have more, bring an outside agency to come in to give us a different look at what we can be doing in the classroom for our EL students. Let's see, I'll call out the PBIS, our suspension rates. That's probably on the next page, sorry Susan. I think Saturday school, individual small group counseling is helping our suspension rates. We do have to suspend students from time to time, but I think that we cut down on that rate. If we didn't cut down on that rate, I specifically know that we did cut down on a lot of suspensions that could have been handed out that were handled differently. So, you know, PBIS, I say that we need to revisit it, but I think it's really made a difference in the school, in our district for behavior. All right, I'll go to the next page, 2.4. I had the fortune of sitting in on the freshman seminar mock interviews, and that was a lot of fun. I think our freshmen are learning about career choices and interview skills. That was a great look at what they're doing and what they're teaching in that course, and I think they're valuable skills. So number 2.5.1, the chronic absenteeism. I think our percentage is going to be down. Kim and Tobin and I talked about the percentages and also came up with the plan on, well, our whole committee did, but we met today and finalized some of the plans that we're going to put into place next year. We're going to meet early on. We're going to send personalized letters to all the families that were chronically absent, and really just, it's not an admonishment by any means. It's a how can we help letter, and give them the resources and let them know that we're here to help, and also let them know that it really is making a difference in their child's education if they aren't coming to school for a month out of the school year. Oh, and we also talked today, we had kind of our final admin meeting today, but 2.6.4, we would, sorry, next page. We're keeping up really well though. Vertical teaming opportunities, we want to provide more opportunities for our staff to get together throughout the district and really have some conversations in those subject areas. So we have a little plan for that. We will look at a possibility of preschool again here in Mendocino in 2021.
In relation to that, you know, there's so much influx with new funding potentially coming from the state, not only for you know, preschool, but also for expanding our kindergarten classes to all-day kindergarten. That we should make sure that we're on top of looking what those funding resources are and seeing if our plans are compatible with them.
Yeah. So we are considering the possibility of a full-day kindergarten. And as Michael said, we could receive funding to make that happen, to help make that happen. So goal 3, writing. The writing assessment was given, I want to say 3, but now I think maybe 4 times at the K-8 this year? 3? Okay, so 3 times at the K-8. They've met a lot and discussed their rubrics and anchor papers. So writing is going to continue to be a focus in our district for the next few years. For goal 4, it's the last one, facilities. We're well on our way to planning for a bond in March of 2020. And the facilities committee has been a great committee to work with, and we've met very religiously, and we would like to develop a long-range plan for every building in the district. I mean, I think every shed, every storage shed in the district, we want to have when it was built, what do we use it for, what are we going to need in the next 5-10 years to maintain that building, and do we need the building? Do we need to downsize? More maintenance, more money, more people. So the next time we'll review this plan is January of 2020.
Yeah. Great job.
Thanks.
This is listed as an action item. What action do we need on it?
Yeah, we don't need to take an action on that. It's mainly discussion. Well, we talk about that every now and then. This is like, these are possible information, discussion, action. So, I mean, we don't have to take action.
So when you look at the strategic plan and you look at our LCAP, do you think that we are good or fair or what in terms of integrating the concerns in our LCAP with our strategic plan?
I think they match up really well together. I think many of the goals in the LCAP are reflected here. So I think I think our single plans also are starting to reflect more of the LCAP. Eventually, I hope someday we can have one plan for our district. Although I think it's nice to have for the school sites to have their individual plans, but I do think that we are incorporating a lot of the LCAP in this plan. So I think we're doing a good job there.
So I'm actually going to ask for action. This is a comprehensive document. Jason works very hard on it. It confirms the direction this school is taking as a district. And I feel it's important for us to support it. If we have opinions on how it needs to be modified, it's an opportunity to do so, and I feel we need to take an action if we approve it as is. So I'm hoping one of you would make a motion to that effect. Does anyone want to take action on it?
I'll move that we approve the strategic plan as presented.
Okay. Anybody want to second?
Second.
Okay. Anyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And 6 o'clock, is anyone in the audience wanting to? Okay, so there's a little paragraph if you want to read it quickly
What's that?
regarding, there's a little paragraph about
yeah,
oh, you're all okay with that? All right. Go ahead.
This is public comment, right?
Yes, but
Non-agenda item?
yes.
I just want,
You should get the microphone.
I just wanted to briefly, my name is Victor Domiani, and I want to briefly add to the comments about the tennis courts that were made earlier tonight, and just let the board know that myself and a few other parents have sort of informally created a group to advocate for the tennis courts at the high school. And as you can tell, we've been over to Club Cardinal already and gotten Paul's ear, which I'm happy to hear. He went on the radio and mentioned it, so that's good. And we know that there's a meeting planned for September for public input into the facilities, and we'll be there. And I think there's some good, compelling reasons why we should try and get some tennis courts at the high school. So we will be joining you at that meeting in September. Thanks.
Would you like to know the state of what we have been calling the tennis courts at that meeting?
What's that?
Would you like to know the current state of the tennis court?
You mean the existing court?
Well, yeah, the fenced flat area that's green.
Right. I've played on those on that quote unquote court.
I didn't know if you wanted an update, on for that meeting. Do you want us to bring forward, is that salvageable or is it
Well, we would propose that new courts be put in,
completely new?
and
Okay.
more than one. The team this year had 12 players come out, and there's only 7 roster slots. So 12 players is, I think, is comparable to some of the bigger sports. And so tennis is a strong program, and I don't know if it gets a lot of attention, but it is a strong program. And it's nice that we're allowed to use the courts at Little River Inn. It's very nice of them to allow that, but 12 players on 2 courts is just not really a great situation. So, we don't typically respond to the public comment, but I'll tell you that it did come up. I'll talk about it a little later, or now I won't, I guess. But it did come up at our meeting we had with our facilities master planning committee meeting, and the thought was initially that there isn't a lot of extra room at the high school for tennis courts because we have the baseball field, which hopefully will be in use, the football or the lacrosse football field, the soccer field. There isn't a lot of room, so somebody proposed an idea of maybe having the tennis courts at Friendship Park. There's some room there between the buildings, to the side of the building, and so I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know if thousands of listeners. I don't want to alarm anybody, but that was one of the locations. I've actually, I don't know if you want to go back and forth, but we've gone out and measured. You could fit 2 courts there, but you could actually fit 3 courts end to end where the existing court is if you went all the way to the property line. Oh. And then I assume put them the that different little way. shack's gonna go, but I mean, I don't know that for sure, but, with the, So have them still lined up the same way? yeah, Okay. and 3
Hmm.
would fit there. From the property line to about the
Well,
end of where that.
It would be
currently
preferable
where
to
that
have it
shack
at the high
is.
school for sure, so, yeah.
Okay.
So at least you should know it's on the radar. You should know that.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, we're at 9.5.
All right, so we're going to start some resolutions here. So the first resolution is the reduction of a classified employee. It's for the transportation department. In the event that we don't have any students traveling from Elk to Albion next year, we will need to reduce the position by 2.5 hours a day. But if we do end up having a student going from Elk to Albion, because if you live in Elk, you're in your home school, or we ask that they go to Albion, so if we're going to do that, I think we should provide transportation. So if we do have a student, then we'll add that 2.5 hours back into that job. And the employee is very aware of the situation.
Okay, so we'll need a motion.
I'll move to approve 9.5, resolution 2019-04.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Wait, I have a question before we go. It says here, it says eliminate the position, but you spoke to it as eliminating a portion of a position.
Yeah, because it really is the position, because the other part of the employee, she works in a different department.
I see.
So
So she's combined.
it's
It's
the transportation portion of her position.
Okay, thank you.
And she delivered lunches out to CompSci too, so she will have to figure that out if she doesn't do that. That's why it's 2.5. That's why it's 2.5 hours.
Okay. Vote?
Aye.
Aye.
9.6.
Right, so these resolutions are kind of annual. Oh no, 9.6. This is the MAD resolution, which we have the public hearing for the maintenance of facilities for our public to use the facilities under our facility use agreement.
I move that we adopt resolution 2019-05.
Second?
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Was that you in the second?
No, it was Mark, second.
Mark.
Okay, 9.7.
9.7.
So 9.7 is authorizing the superintendent to enter into contracts on behalf of the district. It's an annual resolution that will expire in June of 2020.
And we usually put $1? Or is that?
This is just for purchasing supplies, equipment. The bids that you're thinking of, that's the dollar amount.
One of the things I notice, in this resolution is that every 60 days you're to submit to the governing board all transactions entered into and pursuant to this delegation. And I can't recall a single time in the last year where that happened.
Aren't those the warrants?
Is that the warrants? Well, that's not spelled out as a contract, is it? So it's not, this is more,
Well, this is, I think, to purchase supplies and equipment, and
Okay.
then if there is a contract, we typically run them by the board, but maybe we haven't lately. Like for construction contracts.
well, the second paragraph says the superintendent shall have the authority to enter into contracts.
Right.
And the fourth item in the next section says, that you'll submit to review it, all transactions entered into. And I guess I wasn't considering the warrants as
That's what I was. So I don't wonder if that's. But maybe, are you talking about contracts for repairing a boiler?
Yeah, or contracts to buy a Xerox machine, or, you know, those, I mean, that's.
That's how I read it also, so I think there's some validity to that.
Mhm.
Well, we will start, I can start doing that. I mean, obviously I have to. But I will, we can run all those contracts by you. I thought those were kind of captured in the warrants, when we paid them, but we can start doing that.
And there's no spending limit on that?
I thought they were up to a certain
Yeah, I
amount,
thought so
you know,
too.
anything over $100,000 or
The
something like
bids
that.
are like at 90, yeah,
Right, but that-
98.
So I think it might be covered by that other, you know, resolution that we passed earlier.
The bids policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's clear that, you know, we have that information about construction contracts. It's not as clear that we have it on other types of contracts,
Okay.
consultants or,
Mhm.
you know, bulk purchases.
Hmm.
You know, and it, you know, even if you're assiduous and go through the warrants, line by line, you know, you can't tell from an item that that's based on a contract or it's based on a purchase order,
Mhm.
which may be the same as a contract, but it's not quite,
Right,
you know.
yeah.
So we need to take action at this meeting for this, because I feel like we need a little more clarity.
No, I think we could pass it with just the understanding that you know, Jason will look into what needs to be reported and doing.
Yeah, I think we can report all the contracts that we enter into. The one that you approved last June expires on June 30th of
Right.
this year, so it's pretty important that we pass it, and I can begin sending all the contracts by you as well. That won't be hard at all.
So for example, the van.
I understand.
So purchasing the van, how does that fall into place? Would that be,
And we do it through a purchase order,
right?
so.
So is there a spending limit, or is there,
So.
I think I've read somewhere there is. I thought it was 97,000 or something like that.
That, I think, you know, every year we pass a resolution about adjusting the minimum amount of money that can be spent without having a bid,
Right.
which is, I think now up to $92,000 or something like that. So in a way, you know, this covers those things, those items that were bought without a bid process. But it might also include contracts, which are, you know, contracts are different than just going out and deciding to buy 2 vans.
Yeah, like when we do our copier contract, we get quotes or bids, you know.
Right.
So that's an example. It was less than 92,000.
Yeah.
But whenever, I think the limit now, if it's under 15, or if it hits 15,000, then we definitely need to try and get 3 quotes.
and that's the number I was thinking of, the 15.
And that's really only applies typically to the maintenance department.
Right.
We don't enter into other contracts.
And I think, you know, for example, the vans, you've been keeping us up to date on that. And I think what, you know, you have a monthly report that you prepare in terms of your energies, as well as a rundown on suspensions and things like that.
Right.
And you could just,
I could add in there.
you could add it into that report
That's a good idea.
if there are any, you know, in that time frame that you're reporting on, any contracts that the board should be aware of.
Or costs over $15,000.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's not necessarily a contract.
Right, we can specify that.
I
We
think
can-
so, I think I'd prefer that.
Okay, so that any expenditures over $15,000 should be reported to the board.
Or requiring
Or requiring.
yeah, that's how I'd like to see it. Would you like to put together that motion?
So I think we're talking about revising bullet point 4. Every 60 days, the superintendent shall submit to the governing board for its review all transactions in the amount exceeding $15,000 or under a
Enter into
contract.
Right, and then we can approve it as modified.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, That's
Did
the
you get
amendment.
the change of language? Okay, and so would you like to make that the motion?
So I'll make that the motion with the amendment.
Great, any second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 9.8, the bonds.
Oh, yeah, so the facilities bond progress, this is something that we've decided to have on our agenda every month. And I'll let you know that the Facility Master Planning Committee met for the second time with Mark Quattrochi from QKA in June. And so this was the second meeting with 5 of 6 staff members, Tobin, and 2 board members from the Facilities Committee. And I've sent the notes to you. I sent them today. And the plan is, the timeline, the plan is to have one more meeting with that group in most likely early September or late August, but most likely early September, and then have a community input meeting in September. And then I did let Mark know that it would be great if we could move the timeline up about a month to have everything, his report, all complete and ready for approval, so the board can take action to place the item on the March agenda. So that would be by the November 21st board meeting, and he said that wouldn't be a problem. Because you need to do it.
80 days, is it 80 days prior to the?
Somebody recently told me
88 days.
So
So, all right.
the December board meeting would be too late. And he said that wouldn't be a problem at all. So he's going to be
We have
working
the
with,
primary ballot.
yeah.
Okay.
So he's going to be working with Otto this summer, really assessing that facility, and it's moving along.
Great, that's
Yes.
excellent.
I thought they've been 2 very good meetings. A lot of good
Agreed.
input,
I have a couple of comments like that. I've had 2 different discussions with different community members. And one was, I think you had mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, hesitancy to add another bond. And the other was our choice of using Quattrochi again. So I think I just want to share that with all of you, and I think it's just important that and maybe you can even write up something of the reasons for both of those. So I think I know them pretty well, so that we're all on the same page.
I'm sorry, what was the first part? What about the bond?
That we're just adding another bond to taxpayers' taxes, basically, and the hesitancy to do,
Yeah.
to support that. And so I just think,
Understandable.
I think we're all aware of this, but I have a feeling there's going to be, that may be a recurring theme of why. And so that we are all on the same page of the whys, and I think we all have a lot of the same reasons. But I just think that there's definitely gonna be a number of people in the community that share that same concern.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be us getting the information out there and really painting a picture. Like Michael said, we have a high school facility that is older than 90%. Older than 90% of the buildings in California for schools, and that was an eye-opening number. And when we talk about the facility needs that we have for the past 2 years now, just making sure that we get that information out there is going to be important.
That's all.
I think it's a good point, and we have to keep an eye on that. All right, 9.9.
All right, so this is new this year, and I don't typically call things compliance documents very often, but this is, I think, a compliance document from the feds are requiring the state to require school districts to do a federal addendum, an LCAP federal addendum. So what we need to do is talk about how we are using our federal money that we get and how we are tying it to the LCAP. So it's not the best document here, but there's no way to print out my answers, so I just printed out what was on my computer screen. So this needs to be submitted by August, and so it needs to be run by the board, and once it's submitted to the state, They're gonna handpick or randomly pick some of these addendums and review them. And I'll get much more guidance on what exactly the state is looking for if we are chosen. And even if I'm not chosen, we're gonna finally get some guidance, because the state is not providing very much guidance on what needs to be in this document. In the county office, I met with the woman in charge of this document over there, and she gave me some guidance, but it's a really big unknown right now. What exactly are they looking for? So I'll go through it, I guess. So the first thing we need to do is for instructions, strategy, alignment. So we need to align this document. You know, what are we doing with our federal money, our Title II money, Title IV money to our LCAP? So you can go down a little bit to strategy. It's in the middle of the first page right there. So I said that we recognize that there is a lack of funding for a certain population of our students, those that are struggling behaviorally or academically but do not qualify for specialized academic instruction. So that's special education services under IDEA. And here in our district, we use our federal funds to enhance our efforts to provide targeted remedial and early intervention, especially in primary grades K through 2. So we do use our federal money for our RTI programs here, which is in the LCAP. So this is where we are aligned, and I'll go into that a little further down the road here. So alignment, we do align the use of our federal funds to the priorities and goals in our LCAP. All right, so then it goes through all of the parts of the funding system, I guess, that we apply for. So we get Title I Part A money. And so the first one I have to address is parent and family engagement. So we can go down a little bit right there. So then I talk about how we engage parents. This is where I mention the Family Resource Center, the parent conferences that we had, a great participation rate in the district for that. The California Healthy Kids Survey, for the first time this year, we included parents in that. So I think that is clearly engaging parents. And then how we communicate with parents. All right, so then how do we engage them? We do it through our site council, parent nights, volunteer trainings, social worker, and then how we communicate. So it's like I said, the federal government just wants to make sure that we're using our money tied to our LCAP. So keep going. All right, so this is where we are a targeted assistance school or program. So this is where I go into our RTI program a little bit, that we give universal assessments to students in grades K through 2, and students who need that intervention are given that intervention, those intervention services for anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. We then reassess the students to see, how effective were the interventions, and if we do need to make a recommendation for assessment, we do that for special ed services, or we continue with our interventions, or if we see that they've worked and we stop providing those interventions, and then we will catch them at our next opportunity for assess in the fall, or throughout the year, I guess. So then we get on to homeless children and youth services. This is where I talk about the counselor, who is our liaison. So you can see that it's very much tied to the LCAP. Do you want me to go through the whole thing, or?
No.
Okay.
So they're not looking for targeted dollar amounts, they're just
No,
looking for
no.
how the general fund is used.
How we use those federal funds and how we are tying them to our LCAP.
Good, sounds like a lot of work, thank you for doing that.
So we need to take action on this, I think. I'll make a motion to approve the LCAP federal addendum.
I'll second.
All in favor? And now consideration of the lease. Anyone from facilities have any comments about the lease?
No?
I mean, as I read it, the basic changes are that the district is taking control and responsibility for Friendship Park.
Well, so we are, but I think we have a good working arrangement with CCM. So they are going to, really the only change in the lease is under number 17. It's on page 7 and 8 of your lease. And the only thing that is different here is that there's a new a section. So it's, in the past we had a maintenance MOU and a Friendship Park MOU, so now it's all in one document. And we will do the mowing, weeding, pruning, gopher control, watering, but they're gonna do things that we just don't have the personnel to do, which is the custodial. So they're gonna continue to clean up the trash cans and the restrooms after all events. They're gonna open and close the restrooms before and after all events still. And they are going to be managing the field rental requests. So I'll be working with them for when community groups want to use the field. And then we will use our facility use process for that. But we are going to, we're going to let them use Friendship Park for free, when they bring the circus to town.
So the funds for the use of the park go to the district?
They will go to the district because we are maintaining it. That's your understanding too, right? Okay, yeah. So it's essentially putting in writing something that's already happening. We are the ones maintaining the park.
The one thing that isn't incorporated in the lease is the agreement in terms of the rental payment.
Yeah, so we left that the same. It's still listed as $1,200 per month, but we have a separate agreement for the scholarships in lieu of rent that we still have in place. But the goal, and I said it again on our meeting, is for them to begin paying rent again. And I think, I don't know, I think Mark and Winspirit would agree that I think the new board there and the president of the board really is doing a good job in getting their finances under control, and they're paying back some back taxes, and I think she's going to do a great job in getting CCM back in the black and paying rent in the next few years.
That was my impression also.
I agree, and time will tell, that's
Yeah.
a fact, but it
Yeah,
definitely seems
right.
like a breath of fresh air in
Yes.
the management of that organization.
That's great news. So it's action.
I'll move that we approve the amended CCM lease as written.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so these next two resolutions are again annual resolutions that allow us to transfer money between funds as needed, and also to do temporary cash transfers as needed at the close of the year.
I move that we adopt resolution 2019-07 and -08.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, 9.12 is the EPA, the Educational Protection Account. We had a public hearing at the beginning of the meeting. This brings in about $95,000, $95,400. It did for this past year, and all this money is used towards instruction-related services, salaries.
Okay, motion?
I move that we approve resolution 2019-09.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so the next item is the first reading for sexual harassment students. And our last policy for this was done in 2013, and there is a lot more detail. and new sections as far as reporting of sexual harassment, if a student is feeling sexually harassed. And then on page 3 in particular, where there are lists, right there, numbers 4, 5, and 8 are new. But I think that these are it's a much more comprehensive policy. And also it refers to the investigation process for sexual harassment complaints to be done through the UCP, a little further down, through our Uniform Complaint Procedure. And then for the administrative regulation, we don't have one. We've never had a AR for sexual harassment as far as we could find. We scoured our policies, and so again, it gives examples of what sexual harassment is, and then the reporting process and investigation under the Uniform Complaint Procedure.
Now, isn't this something that has to be in the student handbook that is prepared for August?
Yeah, so we need to include it. We need to send it to parents and guardians at the beginning of each year. We need to post the policy at the sites. Well, at least in the main administrative building. That's on the last page, page 6 of the AR. And then a copy needs to also be on the website. So these are things that we need to.
So what I'm saying is that our normal procedure would be to have this come back at our August meeting, but that would be too late. And so should we just go ahead and make a final adoption of this today?
Is the board, I think that we've always done that. We haven't, the sexual, have we always posted it? So yeah, if we want to get the latest and greatest, we probably should.
It's part of the annual parent notification.
We should probably do that. We did that with the Uniform Complaint Procedure, but yeah, we should. If we want to consider this as a final, or we could do it with the understanding that it will become final in August. I guess we shouldn't do that. I guess we should.
I think we should adopt it as a final version because we know we need it to be in place before the start of the school year.
That's a good point.
In terms of what the process of communicating with students and parents, is it just this text in the student handbook that is given to them? Is there anything friendlier or clearer, better
He's wondering that
graphics,
too.
some way of this is important and we want to know that people have read it.
Right.
And how do we do that?
Right. Do you remember what was put in the parent notifications? Do you guys know what is there a reference to a bigger one?
So yeah, that is sent home, and I don't know, I think it's on the checklist that people have to check in order to register their students, and so they can check that they read it, whether they actually read it or not. We don't know. And then there is stuff, I know in the K-8 handbook about harassment processes of what to do about harassment. Students are being harassed.
That's right. Since we went to the online registration, it's one of those documents that they read.
Right, I'm just not wondering, I'm wondering if do the kids have a good understanding of what the, our policy is, and do they understand, what we're talking about, and have a feel for how they can respond?
Well, I know, as board members, we all take a 2-hour course every other year for training in sexual harassment in terms of what qualifies, what things to look for, how to respond, how to eliminate.
But that's only in the
And-
workplace, that's not at the student
No,
level.
no.
Right,
What I'm saying, I'm saying that I'm agreeing with Jim that if we want this to be effective, we really need to have a friendly, informative way of communicating.
Effective.
Yeah.
Well, so as far as students go, I mean, this is something that is covered in health class, but whether it's it's the idea of consent, and it's covered in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade. But then also, I think when incidents occur, counselors, administrators, they work with individual students. As far as a friendly document for parents to read, I think that's something that we could look at.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the parents, although parents certainly need to know this.
Well, that was one point.
Right, but I'm talking about the kids, because the reason that I expected all, if not, maybe 99% of us, have a fairly decent understanding of what our individual rights are about being sexually harassed, is because it was mandated in the workplace. So it was forced upon us, that information, and so now we all, I think, are grateful that we know we have these rights to not be harassed. And so I think what I'm trying to get at, and maybe other guys are too, I don't want to speak for them, is do we have a way to make sure our sons and daughters know what rights they have and what they don't have to put up with, especially given the fact that peer pressure is so great and maybe they don't think they can say something.
I think they do. I think they have that opportunity.
That's what we're asking.
Yeah, they do have that opportunity. I think they do know that because it's, but go ahead.
Well, the principals would know based on curriculum and what's shared with the students,
Sure.
How much of
It
this
also is
is.
important to distinguish because the sexual harassment training we get, like you said, is workplace and hostile work environment and all the different ways, forms it takes. Really, with students, you're really talking about bullying. Like harassment, it's phrased more like in the ed code as under bullying. Is kind of how it comes up. If you look at the wording here, you're talking a lot about Title IX and things like that. So it's like sex discrimination. So it's like, I think, different from what you're actually getting at. So I do think there could be some clarification about, you're talking about harassment, there's sexual harassment and bullying. And I think it falls more under the bullying category, And there is in the handbook some guidance about what is harassment, that it's the intent doesn't matter, it's how the message is received, and those types of things are put out there. So it does come up, not just bullying or harassment, but sexual.
And it's clear, it's clear that if you feel you're a victim, what to do and who to go to and how to.
Right.
And would you say at this point in time, most kids own that, they have that, they know what bullying is, they're gonna say something, not every single person, but most kids know it's an issue and that there's certain safety things they can do
Yes,
to protect
I think so,
themselves.
both in bullying and sexual harassment, and I think as Jason pointed out, that the health classes starting in 5th grade are very go in depth in this topic, and there were huge campaigns at both the high school and the K-8 this year around consent and sexual harassment. It was very detailed in what it is, that it is a crime, that you could be persecuted both in school and in law, law enforcement by penal code, how to have those conversations with partners, so there was really in-depth learning and teaching going on.
Do you have anything to add? Okay, thank you. I appreciate y'all.
I can say as a parent too, that I hear it from my son, that, he hears all this stuff. It's definitely discussed at, I think starting in the middle school, definitely, and then through high school, it comes up, it's discussed in the health class, but also in, like the social studies class and things like that. These issues are brought up, it seems like quite a bit. So I think they're quite knowledgeable about it. The only concern would be, really, I think, with the sexual harassment part for any age level, maybe below 6th grade, then it's, it's a hard subject there. But I do think it's somewhat covered pretty well on our campus as
Well,
well.
and if K-6 bullying is covered,
It's
that's really
exactly,
gonna
it's age
support
appropriate
all.
what's being covered.
Yeah.
I mean, we over time have developed a process for in-service for our staff before the school year begins, because there are lots of things that we want to focus on and make sure people are aware of. And yet the students come back and we don't do the same thing with them. We don't take a half a day of the first day of school or in the first week of school and say, these are things that are important that everybody, should know and have a common ground about. And maybe we should do that. Maybe we should have that kind of anti-bullying,
Well, I think they do it to some degree because
PBIS has some of that built in.
they are doing the expectations in each area of the building, and they talk about what is expected and what they have a whole list of. I mean, you can talk more about it if you want, but they do go.
And that starts the first day of school.
Yeah,
It's the first week of school.
And then for all 6-8, they do take time the first week, usually for a couple days, going through the we have presentations in the classrooms where kind of our bullying process is discussed. We have the yellow forms, report forms, where to get those, how to turn those in, those type of things. So we do spend time at the beginning of the year, let alone the PBIS stations that talk about expectations around the whole school and every year.
I think it's on that level that this will be the most effective. I think parents have a lot of forms to fill out. They check those boxes.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
it's like a use in terms, agreement, on the internet. It's just one more thing. They check a box. So do you feel that the way it's handled educationally? Okay, great. And then the teachers, of course, are going to be brought up to speed. It says at the end that this is going to be passed out to the employees.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Well, technically, if we need more time to read it, we could vote by, now I understand you could vote by email.
And also, just to, all of the places in this policy and AR where it says note, those aren't in the final policy. So it's this is a terrible document to read, but it will, when the final version is much more friendly.
So
Right.
we don't have the final version.
No, it's the final text, but if every place where you see
Every place.
note,
Yeah.
you take those out. So,
But as
But-
far as content, we have all the right
Right.
content.
so I mean, like on this first page, you start down here in terms of the actual document. This is all preface and going through all those things that are referring to the actual government codes is not left in there.
Right.
So I would like to make a motion that we do give it final approval so that it can be incorporated into our beginning of the school year documents, since it is a better version than what we're using now.
I think I'd like to if we can make one modification, that we are approving it as a first read, but in its final version, we approve that it's being used for the documents, just because this document as it stands really isn't the final document. So we can say that we're approving for its distribution with the packet, but when it's in its final version, we won't be
Yeah,
seeing it.
I think that's implicit, but I'll make it
Okay,
explicit if you prefer.
okay, great.
I move that we adopt this in its final form, which eliminates the notes and the legal references. And we do it in one motion tonight so that it can be incorporated in the August handbooks.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Okay.
Do we get the student handbooks in August or September? Does the board get a copy or something?
You can, you haven't in the past.
Oh, we have. I'd like to see one.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the next policy is information only, and this is a required policy that we have, for some reason, never had. So, that's it. This is the CSBA recommended version, so.
Okay.
So, in reading this, there are two things that come to mind. One is there are certain things that come into play if you have more than 15 homeless students in your district. Are we approaching that threshold?
The last count I've heard, has been under 10. Like,
Mhm.
I've heard 8, between 8 and 10. So,
And sort of related to that is, what is the definition of homeless in the context of this board policy?
well,
Right here, there's
on
three.
page 1 of the
Yeah.
AR,
Mm-hmm.
it says that students who are sharing the house of other persons due to a loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason, are living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or camping grounds due to the lack of alternative adequate accommodations, are living in emergency or transitional shelters, or are abandoned in hospitals. So that's what that covers.
So I think it's clear to point, it should be pointed out that when we think of homeless in terms of people sleeping under bridges, that's just a small part of the
Right.
category of homeless, that if you're displaced because, you know, your family didn't pay the rent, and you're sharing space with your uncle, you're homeless in that context. And we, you know, we used to think we had no homeless in our district, but we really did, and we do, and it would not shock me to see if we went over that threshold of 15, and then for all, some of these other requirements to come into play.
Right, it includes a non-consistent place to sleep, so our students that are sleeping on couches in
Yeah.
friends' homes,
Yeah.
such as that. So
Exactly.
homeless is definitely not quite understood, you know, the degree that someone's considered homeless. And I do think that number sounds very low for our district.
I mean, I think we find the more we look at situations that you know, I mean, for example, we find that the number of economically disadvantaged kids in the district keeps going up, and a lot of it's just because we're getting more accurate numbers. And I think the same thing, you know, when we really get down to, you know, analysis, you know, we might have more homeless kids than we think we.
I can get exact numbers from Anna, who is our coordinator.
Right.
Okay, and Mark, you wanted something on future agendas?
Yeah, I think that we need to move the climate crisis up a few notches in terms of curriculum, in terms of the district approach. I think it needs to be a topic of discussion next year. I want to think about what I mean by that more this summer, but I just feel like every person on the planet has their head in the sand. I'm not pointing fingers. I think that things are getting really extreme, and we have an obligation to these kids to prepare them for their future. That's what schools do. And so I don't have anything more specific at the moment, but I think it's something we need to look at.
Anybody else have anything for a future item? Okay, well, have a great July then. We're all done. We're not done.
No, we're not.